I have faintly 3 profiles of people in the fire, which are symbolic of Max's father, mother, and 5-year-old sister, Esther. Max is leaning against the barrack. The barrack was brick, and it's this tortured moment of truth. Your worst nightmare is realized. Your family is dying, and you've been deceived. You've been brought to a place where your family was murdered, and you go into slave labor.
They took him to a place in front of this big building, and they told him to undress, take their jewelry off, and lay it down on the ground. Shoes completely undressed, because they're going to walk into this huge shower room, and they're going to take a shower, and they're going to give them their clothing on the other end after they take their shower. Well, they did go in, and they locked these gates behind them, and they had these shower heads attached to the ceiling. And they turned on these shower heads, and instead of water, Cyclone B poison came out of it, and within minutes, they were all dead. Everybody was dead. And after a few minutes, they loaded their bodies on these little narrow gauge trains they have. They loaded them, and they pushed them into these ovens, crematoriums. And they burned all the bodies, and they took the ashes out, and just took them out in the fields and just disposed of them.
One of the things that the Nazis did during the Holocaust was either destroy or capture a lot of the Jewish symbols or religious pieces, and this was certainly the case in several countries, Czechoslovakia being one of those. But this is a Torah that was taken and was in a warehouse for probably 30 or 40 years, taken by the Nazis. Their plans were to build a museum later and just show how extravagant the Jews were in their pieces of religious art or their symbols. And many, many years after the war, these were found.
It really has a great significance. It survived the Holocaust, and it's being put back in good use. You know, it's not that I'm that religious, but it does have some tremendous meaning to me, significance, as a survivor.
She was hidden in a bunker by nuns to escape the watch of the SS soldiers. In this picture, I'm showing drama through dark and light, which was the only light she saw during that 2-year period was when the door was cracked. And in the picture, I've painted it so that she's laying on the ground, and it's as if her arm and her hands are just sort of meshed into the ground, because I wanted to create this desolate situation, and I kept the picture very simple.
It just was one of the most remarkable stories that we had heard of how she lived in this dark isolation, and just seemed natural. You know, as it goes along with Mitzi's has a much larger ray of light coming through the room, but we took that and showed the darkness and light as Riva was a child, and then carried this through to her as she is now.
That I was taken into a convent by nuns, which I didn't know what a nun means. After the liberation, I find out, and they put me in. They brought me into that convent, and they put me running in with me to a place which they called it like a little bunker. I didn't know what that means either, but that was a place that I was laying there. They eyed me there from 1943 to 1945. It was a very, very small place, but I had no, for me, it was better to die than to be there, but I had no choice. And every couple of days, one of the nuns used to come in and through a little hole of the door, throw me in a little bit of food. Sometimes was days that I couldn't even open my mouth because I was sick of malaria and typhus, and the lice was my breakfast, my dinner, my everything.
I wanted to show the soccer ball was a very important thing. It's a symbol that saved Aisic from beatings and name callings throughout his school years. And the children in the back, I wanted people to wonder, were those Aisic's friends? Were they the non-Jewish kids that were deciding whether or not to harass him, to beat him, to call him names? So we know how cruel things can be in school, but he was the star in school, and he was just a Jewish boy outside of school, one that they could harass.
When they saw me going through this creek, you know, on this little bridge, they would let me through. Nobody would touch me just because of this plain sake. By knowing me, I saved a couple other Jewish kids, you know, from throwing stone on them, you know. Yeah, they would stop, you know, they would stop beating up, and so far just let us through, you know. This was at Passover holiday.
After liberation, Aisic went to Palestine, and for a brief period of time he was a police officer. That's where he met his wife, Riva, who's also a survivor. And then after that, Aisic was a soldier and fought in the war there for Palestine to become the state of Israel.
I survived a Second World War. Then I came to Israel and survived 2 wars. So somebody up there, you know, said, you know, it's no time, not yet. You know, you're going to keep on living.